To wrap up this foldable, we're going to be working on solving two-step equations with fractions. So we're going to review how to solve two-step equations. Step number 1 is draw a dashed line through the equal sign to show our balanced scale. Find the term with the variable, circle or highlight it. We're going to isolate this term by getting rid of plus 3. So the inverse of plus 3 is subtract 3, and I do that to both sides. When I do that, 3 minus 3 is 0, and I'm left with 2x equals 14. Then I have to isolate the variable, so I have to do the inverse of multiplying by 2. So the inverse of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2, and if I do it to one side, then I have to do it to the other. So I've got on this side x equals 14 divided by 2 is 7, so x equals 7 is my final answer here. And if I want to check my solution, I can plug that back in. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 3 is 17, so my answer checks and makes sense. Down here, we're going to be doing the same thing with fractions. So we've got x over 5 minus 1 2/3 equals 3 2/5. So the first thing we're going to do is isolate the term with the variable by doing the inverse of minus 1. So the inverse of minus 1 is adding 1 2/3 to both sides. When I do that, negative 1 2/3 and positive 1 2/3 cancel out, and I'm left with x over 5 equals. Over here, I have to create a common denominator, so I'm going to create a common denominator of 15, because I know that 5 and 3 both go into 15. So this is 3 6/15 plus 1, and I'm going to multiply 3 and 2 by 5 to get a common denominator of 15, and I get 1 10/5. And so when I do that, 3 plus 1 is 4, and 6 plus 10 is 16/15. Now, I have to make this mixed number into, or this improper fraction, I have to add 1 over to 4, so I've got x over 5 equals 5 1/15, because 15 goes into 16 one more time, so I add 1 to 4 to get 5, and I had 1 left over as my remainder. Now I'm going to isolate my variable by doing the inverse of dividing by 5, and the inverse of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. And in order to multiply fractions, we have to create this one right here to be an improper fraction. So these 5's cancel, and x equals 5 times 15 is 75, plus 1 is 76 over 15, times the whole number 5 is like 5 over 1. And so 5 goes into 5 once, and 5 goes into 15 3 times, and we get 76 over 3. The last thing we have to do is take this improper fraction and make it into a mixed number. So 3 goes into 76. Well, let's do the division here. 3 goes into 7 twice. 7 minus 6 is 1. Bring down my 6. 3 goes into 16 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. Subtract and get 1. And so I've got x equals 25, and then there's 1 left over, which means that's 1/3. Oops, 25 and 1/3 as my final answer here. On this next one, we've got 10 equals 5/6 plus n over 3. The inverse of adding 5/6 is subtracting 5/6, and if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. 10 is the same thing as 9 6/6, so I'm going to think of this as 9 6/6 minus 5/6. So 6/6 minus 5/6 is 1/6. And then my whole number is 9. These two cancel out, so 9 1/6 equals n over 3. The inverse of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3, so if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other. And now I have to change this mixed number to an improper fraction. 9 times 6 is 54, plus 1 is 55 over 6, times my whole number, which is 3 over 1. That's how we can write a whole number as a fraction. And so now we're looking at cross-reducing. 3 can go into 3 once, and 3 can go into 6 twice. So these 3's cancel, equals n, and I get 55 over 2 equals n. But I have to ask myself, how many times can 2 go into 55? And you may have to do the division out here. 2 goes into 5 twice, gives us 4. Bring down our 5. 2 goes into 15 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14, and I've got 1 left over, so I'm getting 27.5. N is equal to 27 1/2 here. At this point in time, I would challenge you to try this last one on your own and then watch the end of the video to see if you got it right. So we're isolating this term here. So the inverse of adding 6 2/3 is subtracting 6 2/3. When I do that, these two cancel out, and I've got to create a common denominator here. So I've got 7 5/6 minus 6 and 3 and 6 have a common denominator of 6. So I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 2, and I get 4/6 equals P over 3. So 7 minus 6 is 1. 5 minus 4 is 1/6 equals P over 3. And then the inverse of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3 here. I'm going to change my mixed number into an improper fraction. 1 times 6 is 6, plus 1 is 7/6, times 3 over 1 equals P, because these ones cancel out. And now I've got more cross-reducing. 3 and 6 can cross-reduce because 3 goes into 3 once and 3 goes into 6 twice. And I've got 7/2 equals P. 2 goes into 7 3 times with 1 left over. So P is equal to 3 1/2 is my final answer.